Central Park West, New York City, October 2004. On watching a lunar eclipse. Heavenly body. Burnished at first, then blemished, in earthly foreshadowing, then bearded for a while, then pillow-cased or gunny-sacked like a Wonderland white rabbit, one hind quarter sticking out, then cataracted, shiny eye occluded at 10:22 with a thin gray flannel film, then smudged with a thumbprint of tombstone lichen, and soon illumination is resuming under the orange-gold coating that mirrors the color of the falling trees it floats above. Then at 10:33, just a dusting left of planetary pollen on the lower extremities, and at the mellow tone, 10:40, we return to our regularly scheduled heavenly body. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 54th show in this ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from Shelter Harbor, from the sunlit, moonlit, and star-bright coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Last week, we did some traveling through the nature of time. If you were with us, you traveled along with us through the nature of time, looked at it with varied lenses and senses. This week, I'm inviting you to muse on and take in some gleanings and gleamings of the sun, moon, and stars, from their daily arkings to their enduring entrancings, including some colorful star lore. Well, I've constellated various cultural commentary, poetry, thoughts, and fresh points of inquiry. So, into the solar, lunar, and stellar we go. Maybe we could trip the light fantastic into this with some questions, ones I'd like to ask you about these heavenly bodies, the ones afloat above your own heavenly body, the ones prominent in our day and night skies. What do any of them, sun, moon, or stars, or all of them, evoke for you? What sensations, what reveries? What are your earliest memories of them? Even going way back to childhood, early childhood, and becoming very conscious of them, or contemplative about them, or moved by them in some meaningful way, maybe some indelible way. When have you felt most enchanted by them, whether in nature or inside a book or painting or song or piece of music? What about your inner sun, your inner moon? Do you have a sense of those? And if so, what is that? How might you describe it or somehow express it? There's so much rich mythology and folklore, star lore, about the sun, moon, heavens, rich and diverse, especially from the ancient world and indigenous cultures, and certainly literature. Well, here's a small smattering I felt we might enjoy. Some of it might be a little less familiar. Stanford University's Folklore Center. One is from the Hopi and one is from the Cherokee people. The first, The Boy and the Sun, Hopi, Northern Arizona. A legend from the star lore of Native America, assembled by Brad Snowder. A boy once lived with his mother's mother, for he didn't know who his father was. His grandmother said to ask the sun about his father. Surely the sun would know. One morning the boy made a flower of crushed tortoiseshell, cornmeal, coral, and seashells. He threw the flower upwards, and it made a path into the sky, the Milky Way. He climbed the path, and when he found the sun, he asked, "Who is my father?" And the sun replied, "You have much to learn." The boy fell to earth. He then made a wooden box from a cottonwood tree and sealed himself in it as it floated west down a river to find the sun again. The boy washed ashore where two rivers join. He was freed from the box by a young female rattlesnake. Together they traveled west to find the sun. They saw a meteor fall into the sea on its way to the sun's house. They asked it for a ride. In this way they made it to the sun's house. There they met the sun's mother, the moon, who was working on a piece of turquoise. That evening when the sun came home from his day's work, the boy asked again, "Who is my father?" And the sun replied, "I think I am." Okay, the Cherokee, southeastern U.S., the creation of light. When the earth was dry, the animals came down. It was still dark, so they got the sun and set it in a track to go across the island east to west every day. It was too hot this way, and the red crawfish had his shell scorched to a bright red, which spoiled the meat. The Cherokee do not eat this. The conjurers raised the sun again and again, 7 times until it was right, then left it there. Every day the sun goes along this arc and returns at night to its starting place. Well, I love that expression, star lore. I actually hadn't heard that before. Folklore of the stars. And I went to Wikipedia, as I sometimes do, not always, and liked that name and said maybe they have something on it, which they did. And it says the creating and cherishing of mythical stories about the stars and star patterns, constellations and asterisms. A-S-T-E-R-I-S-M-S. Never knew that word. And I'm a pretty good wordsmith. It has a very long history, practiced by nearly every culture recorded in history, dating as far back as 5,500 years ago. It was practiced by prehistoric cultures of the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods as well. Well, one example of star lore is the inventing of the story of Orion the Hunter and the Scorpius, the scorpion, by the ancient Greeks. They saw a very startling pattern of bright stars in the winter sky that, from their point of view, resembled a mighty hunter who they named Orion. During the summer, they saw another startling pattern that resembled a scorpion. The story went this way. Orion was a mighty proud hunter who was stung by a scorpion. He died of the sting and was placed among the stars by the gods. Although the scorpion was destroyed in vengeance for killing Orion, he was also placed among the stars. In order to prevent Orion and the scorpion from quarreling and fighting with each other, the gods placed Orion and the scorpion at opposite ends of the sky and in opposite seasons, so that both of them can never be in the sky at the same time. How about that? We know, of course, of the various Greek and Roman gods of the sun, the moon, Helios, Apollo, Artemis, Astræus, Titan, and beyond. Well, of course, I think about where would we be without nature's light, whether it's slight or strong. Not only its radiance, but its nourishment of us, of all living things. I am fascinated in the play of light and shadow, chiaroscuro. So I've written and many poems and done a lot of visual poetry around that, and continue to. Here's a poem from La Habra, California, back in February of 2017, Before There's Light. Kind of a shadow poem, I guess we could say. Before there's light, there's only shadow, intangible forms, shapes and silhouettes, lines and outlines, only traces, intimations, suspensions of things, an intriguing there but not all there-ness, until the light of day fills in the picture, fills out the substance, dispels the night shade, the noir, the elusive and illusory, pauses the shadow plays for another day. Whenever there's an equinox, because I know they occur a couple of times a year, as do solstices, but they're still rare, and in their own way, they're always remarkable. There's always a magical aspect and moment about them. Of course, partly because they are so fleeting. This is an ode to the spring equinox, March 2001. I always open myself to some kind of ode when a solstice or equinox happens, and something usually comes into me, and this did that time. Light without shadow, a sub-solar moment, a zenith when day equals night, night, day. Equus nox, when earth tilts neither toward nor away from the sun, neither inclines nor reclines. When sun illuminates our hemispheres in equal measure, northern and southern, left and right. When everyone's shadow disappears. When all, for a solarized moment, is in balance, brilliance between the heavens and the earth. I like to say that we can use other senses, not the obvious ones, to feel things, to feel them, like a sunrise as opposed to just seeing it. Experiment with that. You might find that interesting. There was one moment like that march in New York City, when he marches back, listening to the sunrise. The morning sun must be rising. Under the covers, eyes closed, I listened to the long and short-toned sounds of birds chiming like bedside clocks, rousing the world from its dreams. Joseph Stroud has a marvelous poem that always gets me and captures, I feel, the intensity of light among other things and a tremendously deep presence of a moment. This is from his collection, Out of This World, Joseph Stroud. It's called Feral, F-E-R-A-L. The Plaza of the Gypsies. Under the ruined castle, a spring pouring into a stone basin where burros and horses drink. Since before the time of Cervantes, a taverna, fierce sunlight at noon, the plaza empty, absolute stillness, even the cicadas stunned by the heat. A plate of olives, goat cheese, cucumber. Cobblestones, whitewashed walls, a day like marble. Solstice, crushed rosemary, holding on with everything I have. Wheat fields the color of fawn, bread, black figs, gripping hard with mind and heart clenching, holding on to what's human. This moment, this place where I make my strict joy. Thank you, Joseph Stroud. Well, I spent many winters some of you know from other shows or knowing me personally, in the Yucatan on the Mayan coast, and the play of sunlight on water on the ocean was endlessly fascinating, as you may find it in your experiences. This was from Punta Bete one winter. Sun-sparking sea. Sun-sparking sea, like the magnesium flash of an old photograph. Just like that. Well, the sea is such a great theater of elements at any moment. Dark, light, night, day, season, and always an interesting palette. And this poem speaks to that. It's a poem that I was inspired on the spot to compose in the Museum of Modern Art. I was looking at a painting of John Marin's watercolor sunspots from 1920, made in Cape Split, Maine. It's called, and this poem is called "Sun Baubled Sea" in honor of that and resonance of that. Off the course point of another time, an unfaded ocean verges out in caps and crests of cobalt, indigo, turquoise, past one small bleach-sailed boat toward a streaking sky where the sun becomes baubles of chrome yellow, rose, madder, viridian, and cerulean that float above the watercolor surface, that float inside my watercolored eyes. Here's a poem by Frank Asch, A-S-C-H, from his collection Country Pie from 1979. It's called Sunflakes. If sunlight fell like snowflakes, gleaming yellow and so bright, we could build a sun man. We could have a sunball fight. We could watch the sunflakes drifting in the sky. We could go sleighing in the middle of July through sun drifts and sunbanks. We could ride a sunmobile, and we could touch sunflakes. I wonder how they'd feel. Nice. Fun. Well, in that poem about the shadow and before there's light, it's, right, things are sort of quite rather invisible in their way. There's a sense of them, but they're not fully alive in a way. So look at how the sun brings things to life, and its absence makes them dim or disappear. This was a moment I was traveling south down mid-coast Maine near the Wayside Tea Room in Noblesboro, Maine. One Indian summer a couple of years ago arose this poem in me just as I passed this scene. It's called Sap Green. It was dedicated to my friends Richard and Deborah Lauren Lang up there in Noblesboro. A field sunstruck with October afternoon light, a field of Wolfkan, Diebenkorn, Fairfield Porter color, sap green, stretching out to evergreen woods, a field suffused, almost electric in its vividness, in its charge of aliveness, on the day's passing canvas. As I asked around our opening, we can invite a kind of sunshine into ourselves. Yeah, I like to fill my pockets with sunshine every day. My pockets, any pockets, dispel our inner shadows when we can. This is called It Doesn't Matter if the weather is cloudy or rainy out, as long as it's clear and sunny inside the body. I clustered some of our material tonight, as you're probably going to gather, around sun, sunrise, sunset, moon, stars, more. Galway Cannell has this, as we come to daybreak, from his collection Mortal Acts, Mortal Words. On the tidal mud, just before sunset, dozens of starfishes were creeping. It was as though the mud were a sky, and enormous, imperfect stars moved across it as slowly as the actual stars cross heaven. All at once they stopped, and as if they had simply increased their receptivity to gravity, they sank down into the mud. They faded down into it and lay still. And by the time pink of sunset broke across them, they were as invisible as the true stars at daybreak. Thank you, Galway Cannell. Marvelous poet. If you don't know him, and I've brought him out here and there, but he's well worth knowing. Well, on the northern Ontario shield of Canada, was up in Killarney some summers back with some lovely, lovely old friends. And there were many poems that flowed into me on that summertime in that place. And the landscape was incredible. And I wrote this poem apropos of our theme. It's called The White Hills of La Cloche. Once cloud-high mountains, shaped and worn from hundreds of millions of rainfalls, windfalls, frosts, rounded now into high white hills, all anciently, minerally grained, fine white hats of quartzite, brimmed and bowed in cedar and pine, whose towering crowns catch each sun and sunset, each first light, moonlight, waterlight. And then sunsets. This was on an ancient island in the Aegean, Kea, in the Cyclades. This incredible sunset one day. There were many, but there was this very particular one. It moved me quite. It's titled by the name of the place, Pieces, but it's spelled P-O-I-S-S-E-S, Pieces. Tender caress of mildest air on sea-bathed skin, slow undress of verdant day, yellow tresses of sun falling over our faces, over mountain faces, orchards, temples, storied shores. This night, a jeunesse of sunset stroking our eyes, brushing the mouth of the blue-silver bay and the breadth of the ocean's shoulders with long fingers of aureolin, lemon, bismuth, and gamboge. Pieces. Well, since we're in the Aegean at the moment, there's another poem that I felt ought to be reprised. Was an order for us for our theme, and anyone's dreamy cocktail hour, you could roll this one out. It's called the Ozo Hour. The hour when limbs loosen, eyes soften, anise, ice, and water alchemize. Sun dissolves into saffron, chartreuse. The upper bodies of bathers become half gold, the lower half blue. Moon phosphoresces, spirit floats, conversation flirts, night coalesces. The Ozo Hour. Well, I'm not alone in feeling sunsets are marvelous, uplifting, enchanting, small or large. And I wrote a poem back in April of 2008 for my goddaughter, Excel. She had this lovely painting, among others, of a sunset animals. And I was taken with all of them, and I actually wrote poems to each of them. And we made a book out of it. Very, very lovely and special and keepsake. So this is Painted Sunsets. Yes, painted sunsets are for people to paint or praise, yet also for the animals that add their own color to the hills and valleys that every western sun falls to sleep in, from the hawks to the horses, who also fill their eyes with painted wonder. The French poet Baudelaire waxed romantically about love, as did many poets, me included, but many through time. And we're going to come to some other lovely ones in a little bit. Right after this, actually, I'm going to give you a handful. I think they're, romance and loveliness bound up in those heavenly bodies. Sadness of the Moon is this Baudelaire poem. Tonight the moon is full of laziness, like a beauty reclining on many cushions before going to sleep, with light and distracted touch caressing the contours of her breasts. Upon the satin backs of soft avalanches, she abandons herself to the touch of her own hands and faintly looks down upon pale white visions that climb into space like tropical vines. From time to time in her lonely delirium, she lets a quick tear shoot across the sky, and a pious poet, awake all through the night, takes this pale tear like a fragment of opal into the palm of his hand and places it within his heart, far from the eyes of the sun. Merci, Monsieur Baudelaire. Yes, so no surprise that there are so many romantic associations with the moon. I'm not immune to them. Why would I want to be? While You Sleep is this poem I wrote also in the Cyclades one summer. And I was on one side of the world and my love was on the other side. While you sleep. I walk while you sleep. Swim while you dream. Turn my face to the sun while you turn yours to the moon. Drink dark wine as you drink dark night air. Listen to deep blue water lapping. Listen to your heart beating while you sleep. Well, each moon to me is entirely different in its nature, and each full moon, of course, has its own character. And the Native Americans, especially, as you may know, has in their traditions have each of their different tribes name the moon respectively, usually around some kind of planting season. But this was the blood moon, and it was also together with an eclipse. It was the winter of 2019, if you may remember that lunar eclipse, and it was title of this is Blood Moon. The only thing warm tonight in the deep winter sky, and soon to occlude the wolf moon, ice moon, old moon. During its dousing, a time for howling out our truth to the star-studded universe, so deeply listening, offering up wonder to these rare passages of our planetary nature, like generations of strangers, of ancestors before us, divining the light inside our shadow as it passes so silently, so mysteriously, red-bloodedly over the earth. So when I titled this about musing, it really is to encourage you to waft off on waves of imagination and of all kinds about these things in any way you would like. I felt it deeply imagining once what it might be to travel beyond the moon, out of sight. What might be there that would be a surprise you wouldn't expect? And there's a garden behind the moon. Lucent, silent, ethereally fragrant, afloat in an untarnished sea of tranquility, aglow with large beds of lunar flowers, whose petals shine in orbit like planets around enchantingly astral pistils and stamens. A garden that grows in starlight, a jardin illuminé you enter through the swinging gate of your night or daydreams, where you may idle and muse, meditate, and gaze back now and then at the blue-green earth you traveled from, imagined, and back in time, as exotically and spaciously bloomed from. There's a garden behind the moon. Maybe we'll find out in person sometime. Well, so we know so many poems have been written and songs have been sung and paintings painted and dreams dreamed about the sun, moon, and stars forever. Glass of water. And as I mused on that, some of them fountain up inside me like the Beatles song, "Here Comes the Sun," like Don McLean's song, Vincent, about Vincent van Gogh. Starry, starry night, flaming flowers that brightly blaze, swirling clouds in violet haze, reflect in Vincent's eyes of china blue, colors changing hue, morning fields of amber grain, weathered faces lined in pain are soothed beneath the artist's loving hand. Maybe you know that one. How about Shine On Harvest Moon? Shine on, harvest moon, up in the sky. I ain't had no lovin' since January, February, June or July. There's Neil Young's Harvest Moon, beautiful song. How about Cat Stevens' classic, Moon Shadow? I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. Prairie Moon, that's a good oldie. I love that one. I go for the old, especially the old 20s, 30s, 40s song. Roll along, prairie moon, roll along while I croon, way up high in the sky, prairie moon. Jimmy Stewart, you remember him singing to his sweetheart in the film It's a Wonderful Life? He says he'll lasso the moon for her and pull it down to earth. And he sings about the Buffalo Gals. You remember that? Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight, come out tonight. Buffalo Gals, won't you come out tonight? And we'll dance to the light of the moon. Wonderful, great fun. There's an old Scottish folk song that I love and learned from the Hebrides about a little place called Duna. Here's just part of it. I can give it to you. When I was a young man, before my beard was grey, all to ships and sailormen I gave my heart away. But I'm weary of the sea wind, I'm weary of the foam, and the little stars of Duna call me home. The little stars of Duna call me home. And on and on. So, those are some of my favorites, and among many. What are your favorite songs about these heavenly bodies? Yeah, let me sing them to yourself or to someone. I was musing a while back on Virgo, and this because I love the constellations and love to understand them and learn more about them. And this poem took shape one September. Virgin is the title. You lie overhead, celestially, odalisquely, a large and luminous goddess, presence, between Libra and Leo, a rampant lion and divinely balancing scale, the brightest star point of your being glinting out, found by following the winking curve of a Big Dipper, your fertile constellation of being holding, it is said, a cluster of galaxies, mythologies, virgin mysteries. Well, looking at stars, that's a universal feeling. I feel like when we look at clouds, we look at stars, we're just innocent, full of wonder, like childlike. Likeness takes hold of us all. This is for E. There must be millions of stars there, was written up in Maine. One end of summer. There must be millions of stars there, you said in your off-to-bed message, far south of my far north. When I stepped from the car I'd entered at dusk, they were spreading out in milky ways over the clear state of night in Maine. When I read your words, I wanted to be standing under them, close together, sharing the wonder, warm arms round each other's waists, filling our eyes and pockets with all the millions. I mentioned before about equinoxes and solstices, and I feel so connected, even more so, to the earth when they happen, to nature, to the mythic, to a timelessness, to the river of life, far before me, my time, and far after my time. And it was especially felt in this poem on an autumnal equinox. It was along the Hudson River that I wrote this that day, in that energy of that equinox, eternal rhythms. The sun moves south in a bright cross over the equator, over great rainforests, hunting tigers, hidden tribes. Horus entwines with Seth, Gwyn with Gwythyr, the holly king with the oak king. Light balances with darkness, night with day. Still warm land yields its last best fruits for harvest, while wicker men made of barley stems are set afire, while sacred corn, black, white, yellow, red, is ground and watered to life, while 7 looming faces made of stone look solemnly out to sea, gaze Easter islandly into sunset. A feathered serpent triangled with light, Father, Mother, Son, descends an unshaded pyramid. Mystics, too, descend within themselves to discover. Spirit enters waiting bodies, and at midnight, Alcyone arrives and aligns incandescently from the Pleiades, and the earth, the whole earth, turns again to its eternal rhymes and rhythms. Well, I thought an exploration of the heavens would not be complete without talking about some of the interesting people involved in our discoveries and explorations on an astronomical scale, I guess we could say. And some I know about, but several I didn't, and I thought it was might want to bring that to both my and your attention and interest. Here's a few. Galileo, of course, in Brain Pickings, shares this thought about him. If he was a visionary seer, it was because his supreme tool was neither the microscope nor the telescope, but curiosity itself. An indiscriminate curiosity that rendered him equally interested in the microscopic and the monumental. Perhaps peering into the cell and witnessing its miraculous marvels invisible to the naked eye was what granted him the confidence and faith that the cosmos might hide similar revelations accessible to the curious, tireless, and well-equipped eye, which prompted him to say defiantly, "Who will assert that everything in the universe capable of being perceived is already discovered and known?" Good man. Let us talk of and appreciate Hevelius's revolutionary 17th century star catalog and the first moon map. a visionary manuscript completed by the first female astronomer of the Western world that survived 3 fires to become a beacon, quote, of scientific dedication. Okay, I have a little something on him. He was 68 when his observatory was destroyed, but despite having spent 40 years building his own instruments, making groundbreaking observations with them, and engraving and printing his own books, all consumed with the fire, as he wrote in a letter to the King of France, he refused to sink into bitterness and resignation. Instead, he set out to rebuild the observatory so he could return to observing the stars, and he did it with great resilience, and he wound up creating this fixed star catalog with thousands of calculations on the positions of the stars over decades, and it survived the fire. It was saved by his 13-year-old daughter, the sole daughter, who had a key to his study, and half a millennium later it was rediscovered. It ultimately made its way to Utah's Brigham Young University and became the 1 millionth acquisition by their library. It's an incredible book about him. Is Johannes Velius and his Catalog of Stars, a chronicle of his life and his legacy. It's a very interesting story. Very interesting if you're interested. Etienne Léopold Trouvelot. He made a stunning 19th century astronomical drawings of celestial objects. Really a trailblazing marriage of art and science, more than a century before modern astrophotography. He published more than 50 scientific papers in his life, but he's best known for his astronomical illustrations, of more than 7,000 of them. Quite beguiling. And the best of his pastels were exhibited alongside Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, Heinz Ketchup, the first commercially successful typewriter, and the torch-clutching right arm of the Statue of Liberty at the first World's Fair in Philadelphia, the Centennial International Exhibition of 1876, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. How about that? Let's shine a light on the lost art of astropoetics. I never even heard of that before, but I love that. An 1881 cosmic masterpiece by the forgotten woman who popularized astronomy. Her name was Emma Converse. And in February of 1881, a stunning piece appeared in the Providence Journal under the heading The Beauty of the Evening Sky, telescopic observation of the Moon, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. Its poetic splendor captivated editors and audiences. It was reprinted in the New York Times 2 days later and became what we would call today viral. Newspapers all over the country began reprinting it, often without credit to her, and it was in circulation for a decade. So her columns were among the first popular articles on astronomy that appeared in any daily paper, a century before Carl Sagan. And she pioneered the art of astropoetics, enchanting masses of ordinary people with the extraordinary splendor and mystery of the cosmos. Well, thank you, Emma Converse. I love that. Look at what one person can accomplish. Okay, a short note on the first surviving photograph of the moon was by a fellow named John Adams Whipple, and I found that very interesting. He was a daguerreotypist, and he worked with the head of a great observatory and created the earliest known surviving photograph of the moon. And it continues to stun people with its simple visual poetics. Even though we have all this other technology, there's something about it. He formed the beginning of what became the world's largest collection of astrophotography plates at the Harvard College Observatory, a vast library. If you don't know about it, how about that? Stanley Kunitz has a poem I'd like to streak in. It's Halley's Comet. Here it is. Miss Murphy in first grade wrote its name in chalk across the board and told us it was roaring down the storm tracks of the Milky Way at frightful speed, and if it wandered off its course and smashed into the earth, there'd be no school tomorrow. A red-bearded preacher from the hills with a wild look in his eyes stood in the public square at the playground's edge, proclaiming he was sent by God to save every one of us, even the little children. "Repent, ye sinners," he shouted, waving his hand-lettered sign. At supper, I felt sad to think that it was probably the last meal I'd share with my mother and my sisters, but I felt excited too and scarcely touched my plate. So Mother scolded me and sent me early to my room. The whole family's asleep except for me. They never heard me steal into the stairwell hall and climb the ladder to the fresh night air. Look for me, Father, on the roof of the red brick building at the foot of Green Street. That's where we live, you know, on the top floor. I'm the boy in the white flannel gown, sprawled on this coarse gravel bed, searching the starry sky, waiting for the world to end. Thank you, Stanley Kunitz. Like that. I, too, have a comet poem. I've seen a few in my lifetime to date, and may I see more. This was Kiowa, South Carolina, one spring. It's called Kiowa. Sunset pools pink and pale in the blue-tided marsh. A shooting star descends, a green luminous messenger passing through the darkening veil. And overhead, a comet in cold and ancient plumage shakes its silvered tail across the southern sky. Here's a poem by the former poet laureate from the Great Plains, Ted Kooser, K-O-O-S-E-R, wonderful, also poet, if you don't know him, about him. He was the poet laureate twice in a row, actually, first ever from the Great Plains, by the way. It's called After Years. Today, from a distance, I saw you walking away, and without a sound, the glittering face of a glacier slid into the sea. An ancient oak fell in the Cumberlands, holding only a handful of leaves, and an old woman scattering corn to her chickens looked up for an instant. At the other side of the galaxy, a star 35 times the size of our own sun exploded and vanished, leaving a small green spot on the astronomer's retina as he stood on the great open dome of my heart with no one to tell. If you know about artists, in particular Joseph Cornell, well, he had this incredibly formative, maybe transformative visit to the Hayden Planetarium back in time. And I was reading about that, and I didn't actually know that was so galvanizing. It was the planetarium was another moving experience, he said, especially on the second floor with its blue dome, silhouetted city skyline fringing it, and the gradual appearance of all the stars in the night sky to music. The astronomical paraphernalia, charts, transparencies, broken meteors, and especially compass curios are intriguing, arranged in cases in the hall around the circular hall. On the amid floor, a particularly fine set of murals of the zodiac picked out in white on blue, the nicest rendition of the Gemini I've seen. Well, although the sky had fascinated him since childhood, it was this visit that made astronomy a centerpiece of his art for the remaining 3 decades of his life, both as an object category for his boxes and a sense-making framework for the miniature cosmogonies of meaning nested inside of them. If you don't know his work, it's absolutely extraordinary, including all these celestial ones. Okay, well, Adrienne Rich actually has a poem that dovetails. It's Planetarium is the title. And she wrote it thinking of Carolyn Herschel from 1750 to 1840, astronomer, sister of William and others. A woman in the shape of a monster in the shape of a woman. The skies are full of them. A woman in the snow among the clocks and instruments or measuring the ground with poles in her 98 years to discover 8 comets. She whom the moon ruled like us, levitating into the night sky, riding the polished lenses, galaxies of women, there doing penance for impetuousness, ribs chilled in those spaces of the mind. And I, virile, precise, and absolutely certain, from the mad webs of Uranusborg, encountering the nova, every impulse of light exploding from the core as life flies out of us. Tycho whispering at last, let me not seem to have lived in vain. What we see, and seeing is changing, the light that shrivels a mountain and leaves a man alive, heartbeat of the pulsar, heart sweating through my body, the radio impulse pouring in from Taurus. I am bombarded yet. I stand. I've been standing all my life in the direct path of a battery of signals, the most accurately transmitted, most untranslatable language in the universe. I am a galactic cloud so deep, so involuted that a light wave could take 15 years to travel through me, and has taken. I am an instrument in the shape of a woman, trying to translate pulsations into images, for the relief of the body and the reconstruction of the mind. Thank you, Adrian Rich. I had some pieces about eclipses, but since we've sort of been touching on them, I'm going to slip by those so that we stay in good time. But I'd love to read the one, if I may, that I wrote on the Great American Solar Eclipse. I don't know if you where were you when that was happening? So that was August of 2017. I happened to be in an old Native American wildlife refuge reservation, and wrote this as I stood there looking as best I could at the eclipse, witnessing that. It's called Overshadowing. Long, long past a last great darkness falling over the breadth of the country, occulting over declarers of independence, over everything animate, inanimate, proximate, over everyone under the sun. Now another total solar wonder, this time preceded by a sacred circling of hawks above the highest pine, by double-winged diadems of black and chalk-blue dragonflies landing on outspread branches and blankets, by a knowing, slow-rising music of birds and crickets above the surface, turtles and breathing fish below, by a harmonizing, vitalizing breeze stirring every leaf, reed, and petal, and standing figures around the pond, quietly beholding the hiding and seeking sun, the syzygy, all the supernaturality. Well, I sometimes bring sun, moon, stars, planets, the heavens into poems about people I know. And here are a few of those as we move along. This is for Andrei Olesniczak on his birthday, one of his birthdays. It's called Sun Flowered. A once flowering sun, a now flowering man, growing on a long and strong stem of life, drinking light, showering color, shape, countless seeds of possibility, creativity into the world, always stretching toward the sun, returning bright rays to the air, the sky, fellow men, friends, the fertile earth. This was for a fanciful poem for a once love that I wrote down in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, one spring, for C.H. You on the moon? Well, there you are, clear as a bowl, between the shoulders of the spring-coated trees on my Sunday evening street, just as I expected. Up there on the new moon, the rising full-flower moon, astride it like a hobby horse, happy as can be, with your lovely long legs dangling into a sea of stars that sparkle and tickle your toes and the milky-wayed soles of your free and easy feet. How about some musings by, I'm going to call them soulful scientists, like Alan Lightman, on dark energy, the multiverse, and why we exist. This is from his book, The Accidental Universe, The World You Thought You Knew. And in that he says, out of all the possible amounts of dark energy that our universe might have, the actual amount lies in the tiny sliver of the range that allows life. There is little argument on this point. It does not depend on assumptions about whether we need liquid water for life or oxygen or particular biochemistries. It depends only on the requirement of atoms. As before, one is compelled to ask the question, why does such fine-tuning occur? And the answer, many physicists now believe, the multiverse. A vast number of universes may exist with many different values of the amount of dark energy. Our particular universe is one of them with a small value, permitting the emergence of life. We are here, so our universe must be such a universe. We are an accident from the cosmic lottery hat containing zillions of universes. We happen to draw a universe that allowed life. But then again, if we had not drawn such a ticket, we would not be here to ponder the odds. And then there's Carl Sagan on mystery and why common sense blinds us to the universe and how to live with the unknown. One of the things he said was, we are bathing in mystery and confusion on many subjects, and I think that will always be our destiny. The universe will always be much richer than our ability to understand it. And I'm a big believer that there are mysteries that don't need to ever get solved. They need to stay mysterious. He said it's a critical moment in the history of the world. And this was a while back, by the way. He's not obviously around. We are the representatives of the cosmos. We are an example of what hydrogen atoms can do given 15 billion years of cosmic evolution, and we resonate to these questions. We start with the origin of every human being, and then the origin of our community, our nation, the human species, who our ancestors were, and then the riddle of the origin of life, and the questions, where did the Earth and solar system come from? Where did the galaxies come from? Every one of those questions is deep and significant. They are the subject of folklore, myth, superstition, and religion in every human culture. But for the first time, we are on the verge of answering many of them. I don't mean to suggest that we have the final answers. We are bathing in mystery and confusion on many subjects. And I think that it will always be our destiny. The universe will always be much richer than our ability to understand it. Thank you, Carl Sagan. Okay. Well, we have a small handful left, so give me a moment. I'll come to that. I was going to read you about the odor of outer space, but we'll save that for some other stellar travel. Kay Ryan's poem, Stardust, something each of us has and can spread about in our way. Stardust. Stardust is the hardest thing to hold out for. You must make of yourself a perfect plane, something still upon which something settles, something like sugar grains on something metal, but with none of the chill. It's hard to explain. Consider any star in the firmament, any heavenly body, and this truth. This one speaks the star. Through time, space, histories. Simply giving itself, sharing its light, its distant yet deeply present peace, quiet through each night, asking nothing in return, getting everything in a return of simple, eternal wonder. Let us drink in all the heavens have to offer. Drink freely and deeply and gratefully. This is from one of my exhibitions called Behind the Curtain, spring of 2018, Sun and Moon. And there's a figure that goes with it. Receiving and reflecting the light of the solar, the light of the lunar, the outer and inner sun and moon that illuminate the days, nights, and glories of our cosmic bodies as they rise and set so faithfully, so generously. Mary Oliver rightly praises nature, including the sun. Sunrise. You can die for it, an idea or the world. People have done so, brilliantly, letting their small bodies be bound to the stake, creating an unforgettable fury of light. But this morning, climbing the familiar hills in the familiar fabric of dawn, I thought of China and India and Europe, and I thought how the sun blazes for everyone just so joyfully as it rises under the lashes of my own eyes, and I thought, I am so many. What is my name? What is the name of the deep breath I would take over and over for all of us? Call it whatever you want. It is happiness. It is another one of the ways to enter fire. The sun, moon, stars will carry on long after we have gone from the earth. Centuries of winters, centuries of wars, centuries of civilizations and conquistadors have not stopped the tides from falling or the moon from rising, the beating of birds' wings or women's hearts, the heat of the day, the absolute silence of the stars. Remember, bring the essence in, bring the sun inside you. Your sun also rises. It rises each day you open your eyes, each day you open your heart, every time you enter the great and small moments of your world with a sense of wonder, a taste for adventure, the way Hemingway made his way, boldly, earnestly, one-of-a-kindly, through the wilds of his, its peaks and valleys, streams and plains, well-weathered woods, its sometimes dark and starless, sometimes star and moon-bright nights. Every place, around a table, a crackling or embering fire, a circle of friends, or simply alone with your thoughts, your own words, silent and still, anywhere. And you feel the bounty of the earth. Breathe in its beauty and feast on your life. It rises. And on a closing note for now, finding a moment of stillness. Find a moment of stillness and fullness, and do that regularly. It's important. This was an ode to a winter solstice, but it's about that stillness, standing still with the sun, Meteors are showering overhead this solstice night, this nearly cold moon night, deep wintering night. The North Pole is turning south again, to the echoes of centuries of singing and feasting, fires and dancing, sometimes with poetry and pomegranates, sometimes with bathing in holy rivers, giving alms to beggars and Brahmins. Round the death and rebirth of the light, round the last and next seasons of the earth, solstistere, a night for the sun and each soul to stand still, an invitation to feel your sacred place in nature, your passage through time, the vital part you play in this great mystery, in this endlessly curious, wildly wondrous journey. Thank you again for listening in, floating, thinking, and feeling in. My added appreciation to those enthusiasts lending their financial support to these programs and my poetic arts, greatly devoted to nourishing spirits, uplifting hearts, and opening paths to greater self-awareness and aliveness. If you'd like to donate, you can easily do so in any amount by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891. I also invite patrons to bring me their way for a month or longer this summer or fall as a private poet in residence on their property to create a new flight or more of work to share with and dedicate to them. Connecting with like-spirited collaborators is also of interest and always of interest, a chance to partner and explore creative projects from the musical to the theatrical, and directors or others in search of a very poetic narrator. Send queries, comments, suggestions to me directly anytime, Colin at thepoetorialist.com. Show replays are online. I hope you'll lean in again next week or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to opening and letting yourselves be moved by the wonders and splendors of the sun, moon, and stars that freely and faithfully give us all their precious energies, beauty, poetry, and mystery. Goodbye for now.